Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about how to be an all-star problem solver. Now, let's first start with why being a problem solver is important. I believe that most of the world's problems are solved through creativity and sometimes, most definitely, through entrepreneurship. And that's why I want to share with you some skills and some reasons behind why learning some problem-solving techniques will not only help you be a better business person, but it will tremendously help you out in life because you'll always be looking for solutions in that creative way to problems, and the bigger problems you can solve, the more money you will end up making. So first off, my name is Brenda Mallett. I'm the founder of the Teenpreneur Club. Welcome. I'm happy to have you here today. I want to talk to you first about, there's a lot going on in our world with the coronavirus and businesses being closed, with people sheltering in place, and it's quite chaotic. And more than ever, I think it's an amazing time to just sit back and watch. And what we're going to call this as part one of being an all-star problem solver is being situationally aware. And it's a really challenging time to be situationally aware. Like, I don't want you to get too involved in everything that's going on, because I think sometimes the media can get really it can be too much for us, and it can actually crush our creative capabilities, right? But being situationally aware, this is what I want you to think of. Like, say you're just, say it's a normal situation. I know we're not quite in normal times right now, but maybe you're at the airport and you watch what's going around you, what's going on around you, or you're at school and you're seeing how people are interacting, or you're at, say, a Friday night football game and you're seeing the way the fans and the players and the parents all come together and what that interaction looks like, right? That's situationally aware of the situation around you. And I'm going to break it down a little bit further and say we could be physically, emotionally, environmentally, politically. There are a lot of different subcategories of this situational awareness that you can even niche down or get really more specific about. And I bring this to your attention because I think it's really important to break some of that down into things that you are comfortable talking about and naturally aware. For instance, I love cooking, I love travel. So these are things that I tend to be situationally aware of. And when that happens, I can see changes in the landscape, right? So recently with the coronavirus, very early on, I could see changes in what the airlines were doing before they pretty much just all cut back right now. Because that's an environment that I'm used to paying attention to, right? So I paid attention to the physical environment. There's probably a couple other subcategories in there too, but the physical environment of, say, travel and what was happening as a global reaction started taking place, right? So in that moment of being situationally aware is where I want you to think about step two. I want you to look for problems and listen for complaints. Look for the problems because you'll see stuff around you, but more importantly, listen. What are people complaining about? So to use the example of cutting back on travel, early on, one of the things that I saw a lot were people wearing masks. There were some announcements about handling different things, whether it was cleaning or how people were being scanned differently or interacting differently. I started to see situationally what was happening, right? And I also started listening for complaints. What was happening? People were getting stranded, needed to get home. And so I just paid attention, right? So that's just one small example of looking at something around you and taking it down a notch to start to look and listen to what's going on. Why is that important? Because the more repeated complaints we hear, the bigger the problem is. Doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be a higher revenue producing solution for you or a problem solving solution for you, but it could be. Let me give you an example. I'm going to say just about the beginning of time when we started using taxi cabs, people had complaints about never sure if they were taking the most direct route. It was expensive. People weren't helpful, like wouldn't necessarily help you take your luggage in and out, or they drop you on the wrong side of the street. There were always complaints around taxi cabs. So when Uber came on the scene and offered this refreshing, clean car, I remember in the beginning, people would offer water and they'd say, hey, do you want to charge your phone? It was like this luxury service that was less expensive than taxis. It's no wonder they flourished, right? And that was because the founders were listening to all the complaints and they wanted a better solution. Same thing with Airbnb. People were looking for an alternative to hotels. They wanted to stay in something that felt more at home, and felt like more of a real experience in the city instead of a hotel environment. And so I think it was the three founders were all sleeping on the floor of a rented apartment or something like that. I can't remember the whole story, but they started thinking of a different solution because of the problems and the complaints that they kept hearing. So the bigger the problems, a lot of times, the more you will get paid for coming up with a stellar solution. That's why we're part of the AllStars today. So remember, we're going to be situationally aware. We're going to watch the situation around us, whether it's on a micro level, so whether it's in your home environment, whether it's in a Starbucks, whether it's at school, an airport, whatever that looks like, that environment. Then we're going to look around us and see what problems people are experiencing and listen for their complaints. Finally, I want you to be a solutionist, a solutionista or solutionisto. You get to pick. Start to brainstorm solutions. And I urge you to do this every day. When you have free time on your hands, like a lot of us have time on our hands right now, think about some of the complaints. Watch the news or read a newspaper just for a few minutes and find like 10 complaints and write them down and start to think of solutions. Some amazing, amazing things have come from this coronavirus. I've seen entrepreneurs in 10 days come up with, the gentleman that owns Dyson vacuums, he's come up with respirators that he's going to be making. The founder, Mike Lindell of My Pillow, has come up with ways to make 10,000 masks in his facility. And by, I think it's 10,000 this week, and by next week, it'll be 50,000 masks per day, because they listened. They saw what was going on in this current environment. They listened. They had resources at their disposal and can implement. They could jump in. The reality of it is, those two companies were probably not going to be selling a lot of products. Nobody's thinking about buying vacuums, although a lot of us are homebound right now. Very few are thinking about upgrading their pillow or their sheets right now, right? That's not something that's critical. So to pivot at this point is a really great idea. They have the manufacturing plants, they have stuff in place, and they were able to listen for complaints and act, right? So that was really exciting. So figure out some ways that you can become a solutionist. What I want you to do is just practice, and they don't even have to be good ideas, but what you're going to start doing is exercising that part of your brain that's used to looking for different ways to solve a problem. And that's the really cool part. It's like any other muscle. The more you use it, the better it will get. And before you know it, you'll be a problem-solving solutionist in no time. So let me tell you a few things that all-star problem solvers know, have, or do differently. First of all, experience is big. The more experience you have, and it doesn't have to be work experience or college experience, it's life experiences sometimes. The more you get out and see, the more you can see the environment and hear the complaints, right? So you have the opportunity to experience more ways to be a solutionist, right? So experience, life experience. And that kind of segues into number 2, which is good interpersonal skills. When you get more comfortable with this, I urge you to do it boldly out the gate. But some of you might not quite have the courage to do this yet, or this is something that's new for you. I urge you to develop your interpersonal skills. What does that mean? You got to talk to people. You have to open up. As you hear people complain and complain, if there's a solution that's been churning in the back of your mind, or you've been taking notes on, ask them questions, right? Get more information, because you might find out in one sentence why your solution is no good, or you might find out why they would spend a lot of money for you to give them that solution. right? So you have to start developing those interpersonal skills because you have to be comfortable asking questions. It's kind of like the trial of testing out the ideas that you have and seeing which ones are going to fit, and maybe even taking it to a new level each time you get some feedback from the person that you're speaking with, which is another good segue into the best solutionists don't fear failure. And if you've heard me talk before, you know that I am big on failure. Fail often, fail quickly, recover, learn, and grow. A lot of growing up, you may have had professors or family or people in your world, even sometimes a lot of the mixed messages that come across social media and television teach us that fear of failure or failure is a bad thing. And I urge you to rewrite that book, rewrite that neuro programming in your head, that wire to your brain that tells you that message. You have the ability to rewire that. And what this means is if you fail often and repeatedly and learn and grow, the more you go through this process, you'll realize failure is just part of the act of getting to success. The most successful people on the planet will tell you it's not always fun to fail, but they learn so much more by falling on their face, writing down the lessons that they learned, tweaking, fixing, and acting again. Not being, it's like that get back on the horse idea, right? So I urge you, don't be afraid of failure. Jump in, feet first, keep at it. Finally, another thing that they all have in common is that they're creative, they're innovative, and I said this word earlier, they are okay with pivoting. Just like Mike Lindell and Dyson did, they had factories in place, they were making products that probably were gonna see a decline in revenue or people purchasing their products. Pivoted, they literally on 2 feet went this way and said, what else can we do? Now, I will tell you from watching and listening to both of them live and in interviews, reading interviews, they both felt very emotionally attached to doing something for their countries and for the world to help us combat this pandemic, which was really cool. So it came from an emotional place, but I promise you, it also came from a business place when they stood in front of their team and said, what can we do? What skills do we have? What machines do we have in place? What are our assets? What can we use to help combat or get rid of this pandemic? It was also a business decision. So they were creative. They thought outside the box. They were innovative because they took the tools that they already had in place and maybe brought in other ones. But they probably had someone who had the mindset already on staff to say, we might be able to turn this into a respirator. Let's try. Right? They were willing to take a chance at failing and be innovative. And finally, they pivoted. So I hope this has been a great experience for you. I know you can be amazing problem solvers. Please leave a comment below if you gained insight from this and what steps you're going to take today to become a better problem solver. I know you can do this, entrepreneurs. I'm going to close with one of my favorite quotes from Einstein. It's a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. Sometimes in your education career, you might feel like your creativity is being squished. This kind of problem solving curiosity, this kind of creativity that you get to practice on a daily basis if you just take a few minutes to observe, look around, listen, will help you tremendously at being a creative individual. And the best problem solvers, in my opinion, are the most creative ones. Thank you everyone for joining me. I will see you on the next one.